It's absolutely my pleasure to see each and every one of you. Welcome to the University of Wisconsin at Madison 2011 Diversity Forum. We have, I believe, one of the most fabulous programs that we've assembled for the forum in this year's event. We welcome national and internationally renowned scholars, community leaders, campus agents of change, and importantly, and never to be forgotten, the voice of our students. There's been numerous conversation about the university's diversity initiatives, commitment, purpose, focus, and values that have been touted quite a bit over the last several days. The thing that always gives me a great sense of hope and a great sense of strength is the presence of such a strong and engaged community of folks across our faculty, staff, students, alumni, community members who all believe deeply in the principles of the Wisconsin idea and the importance of being a diverse, equitable, and inclusive institution. We have over 17 posters for today's event, and I'm very thankful for each and every one of you who contributed those posters. We have a keynote speech this morning from Professor Pedro Nogueira, who is going to speak to what I think is one of the epic issues of our time, and that is the challenge that we face with respect to male youth of color and educational issues. We have sessions throughout the day which are going to highlight the work of campus centers like the Delta Center, the Wisely Institute, the Wisconsin Equity and Inclusion Laboratory, events that are going to focus on issues of undocumented students, issues of LGBTQA campus climate, issues of academic performance and achievement, issues of how we engage our faculty, a program that I believe in many ways is reflective of what an institution's diversity commitment must look like. It must be evidence-based. It must be contingent upon numerous different issues that we think are important, and it must embrace the identities and the realities of multiple different groups, not simply one. And we are very proud to have this program today. Please join me in thanking each and every one of our presenters and participants for all that they've contributed. Now, as tends to happen, there's always many things going on at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I see several of my colleagues in senior leadership who are very aware of that. And there's another event that's going on today, which is also important, and that's our Regent meeting, which is taking place in Green Bay, Wisconsin. The Diversity Forum was programmed far in advance of the Regent meeting because we operate under the leadership of Miss Jane Diamond, and Jane leaves nothing to chance and even less to last minute. And so hence, we had our date in place prior to the Regent meeting being scheduled. As a result, I give greetings on behalf of Chancellor Ward, Provost DeLuca, Vice Chancellor Bazell, and several other members of university leadership who would normally be here with us today in community and participating, giving remarks, but for obvious reasons cannot. So greetings from all of them. With those things said as introduction, I wanted to bring forward one of my dear mentees, an alum of the university, a recent alum of the university. An individual who is growing in leadership and I believe has been a trailblazer during his time on campus. We wanted to invite his voice as a recent alum as we open up this event, which will focus on the educational realities of male youth of color, because he is an individual who is a leader in that conversation as well. And we thought it critically important to showcase his voice and to provide an opportunity and a context for him to just to give a little bit about an organization that he created on campus with some of his fellow students. And so without further ado, please join me in welcoming Mr. Robert AGNEW, alum.
Good morning, my fellow educators, not colleagues, not staff, not faculty, not teachers, educators. Now that I have you thinking, welcome to the 2011 Diversity Forum of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Do you feel welcome yet? If not, get comfortable, even though some of you may not be able to stay for the entire forum. I welcome you and charge you to listen for your message. My name is Robert Agnew, Jr. Thank you, Dr. Williams, for having me here and inviting me to speak on behalf of the Wisconsin Association of Black Men and give my perspective. My task is to welcome you, and if I don't do anything else right while I'm up here, at least I know you did feel welcome. My other task is to share my perspective on the issues facing black males today in higher education. The issues of black males, however, don't begin in higher education. They only grow and become multifaceted. I am the co-founder and recent graduate. I am the recent graduate and co-founder of the 2011 Bucky's Best New Student Organization winner, the Wisconsin Association of Black Men, AKA WABM. WABM became a student organization in December 2009. WABM exists to create a communal family structure that aids in the recruitment, development, retention in higher education of men of African descent with the assistance and support of our allies. So that means with everybody in this room. The Wisconsin Association of Black Men envisions its men of African descent educating the world through actions of integrity, intelligence, and initiatives with the assistance and support of our allies. Again, with everyone in this room. The Vice Provost and his team has supported and collaborated with my organization tirelessly over the past years, and I personally thank you. I believe we have and we will continue to collaborate because we have a common recognition. And in the midst of a national, state, local, and for some of us, personal economic budget crisis, there is something worse that is happening. The bank of the black male education is going bankrupt. If the late great Marvin Gaye could stand before you today, he would simply ask, what's going on? I'll tell you what's going on. Educators are not making the investments in the bank of the black male education. Educators, when we underinvest, students underachieve. Overinvestment. Identifying that is easy. There's an overinvestment of black males in the prison system. There are more African American males going to prison than graduating from high school. Educators. Black males are learning in confinement versus learning in community. A community that cheers self-confidence in one's ability. So what needs to happen to stop this bank from going bankrupt? We need to diversify our funds. Today is the day that we make an investment in the bank of the black male education, in the male of color in education. In reality, we are only as wealthy as our education system proves to be for all students. Educators, you have deposited yourself here, so you don't need a buy-in or somebody to sell you something. Because by your very title, you are an investor. An educator is an investor. My organization is investing in the lives of African American males on campus. We have created numerous events, we have started numerous events that has created the communal family structure where males of African descent can come and be transparent with one another and have a place and a voice and a space that we can find ourselves and identify with one another. Again, my organization is investing. Remember, if you are not a part of the solution, then you are a part of the problem. Again, I welcome you to the 2011 Diversity Forum. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Linda Oakley. I'm a professor on campus here for quite a few years. And I am currently involved with the UW Medical School Wisconsin Partnership Program, a $10 million effort to close the black-white infant mortality gap in the state of Wisconsin. This is a large part of the Wisconsin idea, so I too am very grateful to this forum to have an opportunity to introduce our keynote speaker. Pedro Noguera is the Peter Agnew Professor of Education at New York University. He is an urban sociologist whose scholarship and research focuses on the ways in which schools are influenced by social and economic conditions in the urban environment. He was a classroom teacher in public schools in Providence, Rhode Island, and Oakland, California. He's held tenured faculty appointments at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. He's published over 150 research articles, monographs, and research reports on topics in urban school reform. He's also published several books, and many of you have a copy of a very important publication of his on your table, which I hope you'll take advantage of to read. His work has appeared in multiple major research journals, and we've listed his publications for you, some of them. Dr. Noguera appears as a regular commentator on educational issues on CNN, National Public Radio, and other national news outlets. We are very pleased and very honored and very challenged to have Dr. Noguera with us this morning.
Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here with you in Madison today, where it's actually warmer than it is in New York right now. And particularly for sports fans, a good time to be in Wisconsin, I think. You've got your Brewers in the playoffs, although they're in Game 5, so we don't know how that's going to end up. You've got your Green Bay Packers just smoking. And then there's those Badgers that aren't too bad either, right? So a lot to be happy for if you're a Wisconsin sports fan. Now, I'll tell you the truth, I'm not a Wisconsin sports fan. I like the Yankees, not the Brewers. I'm a Raider fan, not a Packer fan, and I like the Cal Bears, not the Badgers. I'm sorry, but I'll tell you this, I became a big fan of Wisconsin last spring when you took it to your governor in defense of public education. Because what you did is you set for the whole nation an example that showed that public education is in the best interest of our democracy, and when politicians decide it's their political agenda to undermine it, that they will be challenged by the people. And that was a bold and inspiring example that I think will not only benefit the whole country, but hopefully reinvigorate this democracy. I'm particularly happy to be with you today to speak about the crisis facing young men in America. And I want to start by saying this, that it is, while most pronounced among African American men, it is not simply a black male problem. It is now the case that in every state in the country, there are more women than men in college. And that's been true for just over 15 years. It is also true that this recession we're in has increasingly aired light of the fact that it is impacting men even more than women. Because men, the unemployment rates for men are rising much faster. And there's growing evidence that this is not simply an American problem, but a global one. That is, we don't know why it is exactly, because as I think most of us would still readily attest, men continue to hold most of the power in the world. Right? Most of the positions in government, most of the positions in the economy, and particularly in the corporate sector. Probably one of the reasons why we have such a problem in our economy. Certainly most of the positions of leadership in the religious sector, even in the nonprofit sector. So patriarchy is pretty much firmly intact. Nonetheless, we have all the signs of a boy problem, of a man problem. And I believe that problem is directly related to patriarchy, a point I'll come back to a little later. But I think that the whole paradigm, this idea that men control and the way men control has run its course. And it's showing its own weaknesses in lots of different ways. And one of the ways we see those weaknesses most clearly is in the status of African American men and boys. My colleague Lonnie Guinier, professor at Harvard Law School, wrote an important book called The Canary in the Mine. And one of the things she argued is that black males have to be seen like the canary in the mine. And those of us who know that metaphor know that the miners bring the canary into the mines with them to warn them when they're running out of oxygen. Because if the canary starts to suffer, if the canary dies, they're all in trouble. And Lonnie Guinier uses that metaphor because she's saying that the crises facing black males are not merely a black male crisis, they're an American crisis. But I don't think America sees it that way. I think America sees it as a black male problem. And consequently, America thinks black males should solve it, because black males are largely seen as expendable. That's the reason why I question the use of the term crisis to describe the problem. A crisis is, by definition, a temporary situation. You can't be in a permanent state of crisis. A hurricane is a crisis. An earthquake is a crisis. A terrorist attack is a crisis. And you can tell it's a crisis because it's almost always an urgent response. We'll do whatever we can to address the suffering in the wake of that crisis. There's no urgent response related to the challenges facing black males in America. Hence, to call it a crisis, I believe, misdiagnoses the problem. I would say that when you start to understand the dimensions of the problem, it is a far bigger, more debilitating problem than we have seen before. But because it seems to particularly visit one segment of the society, America is willing to write it off as not really our problem, but their problem. And the sad thing is, the problems show up first and most clearly in our schools. I say sadly because we would like to think of schools as places that provide support and nurturing to our children, but if you're a black male student, you are more likely to experience hardship, marginalization, and failure than you are to experience support, development, and achievement. Throughout the country, black male students are more likely than any other group to be suspended or expelled, more likely to be placed in special education, and when placed, to be placed in the most restrictive environments. As likely as Latino males to drop out of school, as likely to be underrepresented in college, underrepresented in honors courses, underrepresented in advanced placement courses, in gifted and talented programs. In every category that we associate with success, black males are underrepresented. And in every category we associate with failure, we are overrepresented. It is pervasive, it is persistent, it is not new. In fact, because it is not new, I would say that what characterizes the response of many schools is an air of complacency. It is the norm. And when failure becomes normalized, no one loses sleep over it, because in the back of their minds, they have come up with rationalizations for why that problem exists, and usually it lies in either blaming their parents or blaming the children themselves. And whenever you find schools that have come to rationalize the failure of children in this way, you find schools that should be shut down. That's harsh, isn't it? Especially after what I just said about defending public education. Now, I do defend public education, but I don't defend schools that allow and rationalize the failure of large numbers of children. And that's what's happening in too many of our schools today, particularly for black male children. And I think most of us are aware of the fact that what's happening to black male children parallels what will happen to black male adults. Because black male adults have the highest unemployment rates, the highest incarceration rates. Black males are the only segment of the US population with a declining life expectancy. Think about that one. Everyone else is living longer and longer, with the exception of black males. Black males save America money in terms of Social Security because they, on average, die before they will collect. I would say that if this type of hardship were visited upon white males, we would indeed have a crisis on our hands. We would indeed see commissions set up. We would see all kinds of blue ribbon committees, but not so with black males. Not to say that there aren't lots of groups that occasionally will say there's a problem, we need to do something. Mayor Bloomberg in New York City recently announced that they would direct over $100 million, he and George Soros, to addressing this problem, although they never specify what they would do or how it would be spent, but they at least acknowledged there was a problem and they should do something. But I would say that for the most part, we've been watching black males die in great numbers, because black males also lead the nation in homicides. And we have not, as a nation, seen it as an American problem. And so consequently, we are less able to respond effectively because the problem has been marginalized. It's been packaged as a black male issue. And sometimes we contribute to that too, those of us who are black males, because we have bought into the idea that somehow it is our problem, it is our issue, and not really an American one. And it's only when we start to realize that the problem is deeply rooted in American institutions, in American history, and can only be solved when, as a nation, we come together and decide that what affects the most vulnerable affects all of us. That's the only way we'll begin to address it. It was one of the reasons why I was critical of the Million Man March, not because I didn't support the idea of black men standing up and say we will be responsible fathers and we will take care of our children. That's a wonderful thing. But the Million Man March occurred in Washington, D.C. at the very moment that Newt Gingrich and his cohort were implementing the Contract on America. There was no mention of that assault on the American people during that Million Man March. If we don't hold our political institutions accountable, if we don't expect employers to do a better job at recruiting and hiring black males, we will not see a solution. It is our marginalization that ultimately is what drives the failure. And any strategy that contributes to that marginalization is a strategy that will also contribute to failure. Point I'll come back to again. When you start to think about the dimensions of the problems facing black men, you start to realize that they're multifaceted and they can't be isolated because black males have high infant mortality rates, experience certain health conditions like heart disease and diabetes at higher rates than other groups, higher levels of unemployment. They manifest themselves in different sectors so that you can't say it's simply one thing, it's many things. That's why I would say that it's really a syndrome more so than simply an educational or even an employment problem. And as we know with other syndromes, like the acquired immune deficiency syndrome, right? AIDS. Remember, for a long time, they didn't know what AIDS was. Had trouble diagnosing what it was. Until they finally came to the conclusion, basically, it's an assault on the immune system. And it's when the immune system breaks down that the body becomes susceptible to a variety of other secondary diseases. And that's the reason why so many people end up dying of AIDS. Well, the immune systems for black males in America are also broken down. There are no buffers. There are very few protections. And unfortunately, schools are a place where those protections often aren't present either. I was visiting a school in the Bay Area a few years ago, being given a tour of the school by the assistant principal, who was very proud to show off the new facilities and showed me his library, his computer lab. And we get to his office, he sees a little boy about 7 or 8 years old waiting outside the door for him. He turns to me and says, "You see that boy?" He said, "There's a prison cell in San Quentin waiting for that boy right now." I said, "Well, how do you know that?" He said, "Well, his father's in prison, his brother's in prison, and I could tell by the way he behaves, because he's a hellraiser, that he's going to end up in prison too." So then I asked, "Well, then, given what you know about this little boy, what is the school doing to keep him out of prison?" And he looks at me surprised, because he doesn't think that's his job. In fact, what he was about to do was to send him home on an extended suspension, where he would be in the care of his sick grandmother, and the school would send the work home so they could continue to collect average daily attendance, even though he wasn't present, and in effect, wash their hands of this troubled little boy. Now, you should know two things. First of all, the assistant principal was a black man. And so I would caution anyone who thinks that this is a simple issue, that the culprits, that those who are contributing to the marginalization and failure of black males are simply white racists, are, I think, mistaken. The problem is far more complex than that. This principal was operating, or this assistant principal was operating under a set of norms and rules about how you deal with problem behavior, and he was treating this boy the way he would treat any other troubled child. Except he didn't acknowledge that what was driving the trouble were unmet needs. Think about that one. We disproportionately punish the children with the greatest needs. And we punish them because of those unmet needs. And we punish them typically by sending them home to watch television. And ask yourself, why would that work? But that's the strategy, isn't it? And that's the reason why we end up with a school-to-prison pipeline. Because many of those young people who are sent home to watch TV don't just stay home. Some of them end up out on the street. And so our discipline problems contribute to delinquency in our communities, contribute to criminalization. and start a process of young people being inducted into a penal system. And so this assistant principal was right. That young man was on a pathway to San Quentin, but what he didn't know was that he was part of the, he was helping him along. Right? He was part of the process too. Now, the other thing that's true about this incident is that the boy did have trouble. And anybody who's starting a school knows it is hard to teach in a classroom where there are children who are disruptive, who are acting out. And so they were at a loss for what to do about this boy. And I would say that many schools are at a loss about what to do with children whose needs they don't know how to meet. But that's why we are the educators, and that's what our first speaker said. We're educators, which means that we're supposed to be creative in how we respond to the developmental needs of children. But one of the things that's happened in the last 10 to 15 years in this country is that as we become more and more fixated on achievement, we become less and less focused on child development. And anybody who knows about child development knows about Abraham Maslow and the hierarchy of human needs. What's at the base of the hierarchy? The need every child has for security, for food, for nurturing, for love, for support. What do you find with the children who are giving most trouble typically? Unmet needs. Needs not being met. Lack of relationship with caring adults. And so I would argue that part of the reason why our schools are not the places where we break the cycle of failure, but instead start the process of failure, because the schools are focused on the wrong things. They're focused on raising test scores instead of on elevating the consciousness of their children. Heard a minister say it the other day. He was talking to some teachers who were so worried about the boys whose pants are too low. He said, raise their minds, they will raise their pants themselves. But the teachers didn't get it. They didn't understand what that meant, because the teachers are being socialized very differently now. They're focused on how to prepare them for the test instead of how to prepare them for life. Point I'll come back to, because the schools that are succeeding in educating young black males are focused on preparing them for life. Why do we have this problem? What is it about being black and male in America that results in so much failure, so much hardship? Well, some of it's rooted in our history. Right? Black males, like black women, black people, were brought to this country as slaves for free labor. And as the need for that free labor, for unskilled labor, has diminished over time, black people, black males especially, have become redundant labor. A supply of labor that we don't know what to do with anymore. And Loic Kant, a sociologist at Berkeley, has argued that the way we've come to solve that is through the penal system. Because when you have a population of people that you don't want but are stuck with, then you have to figure out a way to control them. And throughout this country, in cities, large and small, there are vast populations of black men who are undereducated, unemployed, with few options. And that is a direct product of this history. It's also true in this country that black males have occupied a position of danger in the American imagination. That black males, by virtue of their very presence, have been seen as a threat. It's one of the things that rationalized the creation of the Ku Klux Klan in the South. It's one of the things that continues to rationalize police violence against black people and overly aggressive policing, like we're seeing in New York City right now. At a time where crime rates have declined, arrest rates have gone up for black and Latino males. Even though all the evidence shows white teenagers are more likely to possess and use drugs than black and Latino teenagers arrested far more likely. And I would say that, again, is rooted in the American imagination, that this group constitutes a problem, a threat that needs to be contained. And it's one of the reasons why there's so little outrage about mass incarceration. Because if you believe that those who are being incarcerated are those who would otherwise threaten you, pose a danger to you, then you say, yes, keep locking them up. Even if every dollar we spend to incarcerate is a dollar we don't have for health care or for education or for anything else, we will keep locking them up. We lock up more people than any country in history at any time in the history of the world. And it's not even a political issue. There are a few people trying to raise this, hey, this is a problem. And the only thing that's actually helped to lower incarceration rates now is the recession. They finally figured out this is too expensive. But it's not coming from a humane sense that this is wrong. It's coming from a desire to balance budgets. So history is a problem. So is culture, American culture. But it's important to acknowledge that black males are not simply victims in this. Homi Bhabha, who is a cultural theorist at Harvard, writes that any group that's oppressed in any society occupies a unique position. That is, a position where they are both the object of phobia, but also a fetish. Phobia and fetish. Think about that one. Phobia is apparent, right? Stereotypes of black males in America are typically associated with violence, with crime, with menace. But the fetish is there too. Think about those sports games that we like. Every Sunday we will watch black men on the fields, banging their heads against each other and playing basketball. And as long as they are either entertaining on the athletic field or in a concert hall, black men are loved in America. Some of our greatest icons in America are black men. Michael Jordan, President Obama, at least for some. I would say Michael Jackson, but hard to know how he identified himself at the end. I would say Tiger Woods, but as we know, once he got in trouble for a little bit of philandering, that his stock declined. But we can cite numerous examples of black men who are beloved in America. Colin Powell, and several others who are beloved figures in American society. And I would say that if you occupy certain roles in America, being a black and a male is not a problem. Not a problem for Jay-Z. Right? Not a problem for legions of athletes out there. Latino males have a different issue. I just did a book with some colleagues called Invisible No More, about the fact that Latino males are almost invisible in American society. But black males are not invisible, they are the opposite, highly visible, and consequently highly scrutinized. And because of that visibility, and because that visibility takes a particular form, black males are more likely to think that the pathway to success is through athletics or entertainment, because that's where they're venerated, that's where they are glamorized. So when you go into American schools and you ask black male children, what do you want to be when you grow up? More than half the time, what you will hear is athlete or entertainer. That is an American phenomenon. I know that because I've done research in the Caribbean. The little island of Barbados. Barbados is a small, underdeveloped island in the Caribbean. Main sources of income are tourism and sugarcane. But Barbados has a higher adult literacy rate than the United States. I was there 5 years ago. The average SAT score for 300 students in Barbados who took the SAT through the U.S. Embassy was just over 1,200. This was when 1,400 was still the top score. All the students who took the SAT were black, more than half of them male, all of them poor. Why is it that being poor and black and male in Barbados is not an obstacle to high achievement? Well, when you talk to children in Barbados about what they want to be, you don't hear a rap star or ball player, because their aspirations aren't limited by stereotypes. And if we don't believe that the stereotypes will limit and confine and distort the image, then we don't understand the full nature of the problem. I was trying to convey this to a group of young black males when I was asked recently to speak at Rikers Island. Rikers Island, for those of you who don't know, is the largest penal institution in the world. In the world. Okay. 1984, there was one school at Rikers for adolescents who were incarcerated. Today, there are 20 schools at Rikers. Okay. I was asked by one of the teachers at Rikers to please come and speak to their students. We run a debate program there, and they said, would you please come and speak to all the students? I said, what do you want me to speak about? They said, I want you to say something to inspire them. And I thought long and hard, what could I possibly say that will inspire them? So I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I came, and those of you who've gone to visit prison know getting to prison is not easy. Have to clear a lot of security, be searched repeatedly. Rikers is not easy to get to. It's behind LaGuardia Airport out there. But I get there into a large room, and the young men are there in their orange jumpsuits, not looking particularly happy to hear a lecture from a professor from NYU. And I start by telling them this. I said, there is a conspiracy to keep you here. There are politicians who have based their careers on locking people like you up. There are industries that are formed off of your labor while you are incarcerated. There are whole towns that are dependent on prisons for jobs that are lobbying to keep you here because you bring them money. And they're shaking their heads. I said, these guards that are watching you today count on you coming back for their good-paying jobs. And the guards are shaking. Well, what's going on? Who invited this guy? Why? I said, my question to you is, are you part of the conspiracy too? Because none of this is possible unless you continue to make bad choices. Unless you continue to allow yourself to wind up locked up and in prison because you've broken the law, you've made a stupid decision, you've hurt someone, you've broken into someone's house, that you can't just see yourself as a victim. Well, that set off a very lively discussion. And several of them wanted to speak up and explain why they actually shouldn't be there. They were set up, and they just needed a better lawyer. And another one explained that what he was going to do when he got out. And it was very engaging, and I thought, wow, this is working. I got their attention. I got them engaged. Got them so engaged that the teachers got a little worried, said we don't like to get them too excited. So we have to stop now. So they were filing out, and one of the teachers said, I'd like you to meet this young man in particular. Talk to him. Because he's brilliant in math. And if he got encouraged, he could do his GED and go to community college when he gets out. He's only 17. So I go to meet him, I put out my hand, and he says, I am a Crip for life. And he walks ahead. And I knew then what I already knew, which takes more than one engagement. More than one provocative speech to change a mindset that's conditioned over several years. For many of our young men, prison is a rite of passage. It's a rite of passage because too many of the adults that they know are behind bars. Talking to a group of 7th graders in Brooklyn who I asked them, how many of you think you might one day end up in prison? And every single one raised their hand. And what was really striking about that is they were not afraid. One of them told me that when you go to prison, you can get your teeth fixed. Another one said when you go to prison, people will come out. When you come out, you'll be respected. And they had cousins and family in prison, and so they saw prison as a place you go to prove yourself. Think about it. If you're not afraid of prison, there's probably not much out there you are afraid of. And how does that influence your choices? So now let me describe schools where they are doing everything they can to break that pattern. Everything they can to make prison a much less likely outcome and college a much more secure outcome. And the good news is those schools exist right now. Some of you have already heard about Urban Prep in Chicago. Right? Tim King has been leading an effort on the South Side to create a school where young black men can thrive, can learn in a safe environment, and it's working. A school like that in Brooklyn right now called Excellence. Excellence is a charter school. Started in Bed-Stuy, and all of the children at this school come from the housing projects across the street because there's a preference in the lottery for children from the housing projects. I always say to those who don't like charter schools, what don't you like when those children are well served? What don't you like? Especially when you see the failure of the same children in the public schools. I was so struck when I went to visit Excellence because they had all the kindergarten stations working on reading. I said, wow, this is a lot for a 5-year-old. They said, oh yeah, but every 20 minutes they get a break. I said, every 20 minutes? I said, every 20 minutes, because we want to make sure there's plenty of time for play. And I was there at one of the breaks, and he said, okay, now it's time to act like animals. And one child let out a roar, rah! Another child got on the ground and started shaking like a snake. I said, what's going on? He said, well, we're working on an animal unit. Now they're acting like animals. I said, well, this is interesting. He says, well, we incorporate play into their lessons. And even the play is related to what they're learning in their classrooms. This is a school that has carefully thought about everything they're doing to socialize these young men. So the way they promote discipline, the way they promote concentration is not by anesthetizing these children with drugs, but by teaching violin. Amazing. Watch a kid play violin. You know how to play violin? I don't know how to play violin, but when you watch someone play violin, you have to control your breathing. You have to control your posture. You have to be really focused. You know what the research shows? That if you want to teach a child to become better able to concentrate, to focus, to pay attention, teach them an instrument. Teach them to play chess. Why? Because those activities help children to concentrate, help them to focus. And these are children that otherwise would not have access to music. But at Excellence, they make sure they get a well-rounded education with athletics, with music, with theater, with science, with history, with teachers who care and believe in them because they also believe that the key to turning around the outcomes are strong, positive relationships between adults and children. That if the children believe that the adults really care about them, have their back, and caring does not mean you put up with bad behavior. Right? Caring means that you insist they conduct themselves appropriately. That's why they're called scholars. And Excellence today is one of the highest performing schools of any kind in New York State, showing that there's nothing wrong with being black and male if you're in a school that knows how to meet your needs. There's another school in the Bronx, Eagle Academy. Eagle Academy was founded by David Banks. David started the school because he wanted to create a school that would counter the culture of violence in the South Bronx. Too many young men being lost to gangs, to homicide, to prison. They knew they needed a school where the culture of the school was more powerful than the culture of the streets. That was the original intention. I first came to learn about Eagle by traveling the train one day. Anybody knows about subways in New York knows the worst time to take the subway in New York City is at 3:30, because that's when school lets out. When school lets out, the kids are excited, they're rambunctious, they're loud, and you don't want to be on the train if you can avoid it at that time. But unfortunately, I was on the train headed uptown, and they were there, and it was loud and noisy. But I noticed 3 young men on the train in ties. I see one offer his seat to a pregnant passenger. And I was taken by that. And I went over to ask who they were, because I thought at first maybe they were Mormons, because there are Mormons in the area. But they said, no, we're not Mormons. We're from Eagle Academy. Turned out they just come from the Museum of Natural History, headed back to the Bronx. I said, well, where's your teacher? They said, we know how to get to the Bronx ourselves. We do it every day. I said, well, who taught you to give up your seat to a passenger like that? They said, well, that's the Eagle Way. I said, well, I need to learn more about the Eagle Way. Eagle Academy is doing what Teresa Perry and Claude Steele and the late Asa Hilliard write about in the book Young, Gifted, and Black. That is, they have created a counter-narrative that permeates the school, a narrative that says you are a part of greatness, you are a part of excellence, you are not what they say you are. And so Eagle Academy looks like a prep school. Eagle Academy has fencing, has chess, has robotics. Why? Because they believe that they keep the kids busy and engaged for long periods of time so the school day lasts well into the evening. They won't have time for gangs. They're too busy for gangs. I got to see the robotics team in action 2 years ago at the Javits Center in the US First competition. You're familiar with US First? This is where young people compete with their robots. 3,000 young people in a large auditorium with their robots, blasting music. I'm a judge, have a headache. I know nothing about robots. But I learned that the kids from Eagle Academy had come in 6th place. So I came to tell them the news. And I tell them you come in 6th place, and they start jumping up and down, celebrating. I said, well, that's good, but guess what? Only the top 3 teams go to the Georgia Dome for the finals. They said, we don't care. 6 out of 80 teams is pretty good. I said, I agree. Very good. Because the top 3 teams were which ones? Stuyvesant, Bronx Science, and Brooklyn Tech, the exam schools that you have to be screened to get into. So it's real good to come in 6th place. So explain to me how you built this robot. Well, the first one of them took out the notes and he explained to me the physics behind the robot. Because you had to understand the motion of the arm and understand how it was supposed to move, and if it didn't move a particular way, you had to go back to the drawing board to look at your design. Because I couldn't understand any of the things on the paper, I said, well, this is very impressive. I said, well, who helped you build the robot? They said, well, the first person to help us was our custodian. I said, the custodian helped you build the robot? I said, yep, he's a very handy man. Anytime we needed a part, he got it for us. We don't know where he gets the parts from. But anytime we need something, he gets it to us. I said, well, that's great. I said, who else helped you? They said, well, our science teacher helped us. I said, your science teacher? They said, yes, and there he is right there. And he was half asleep. I said, wow, he looks so tired. And he gets up, he said, that's because I was up till 3 in the morning with these kids. I said, you up till 3 in the morning working on the robot? He said, listen, I've been working weekends. I've been working evenings for the last 3 months on this robot. I said, you guys work evenings and weekends? They all shook their heads. I said, do you get any extra credit for this? They said, no. I asked him, do you get paid any extra? He said, not a dime. He said, but their enthusiasm keeps me coming. These kids were so committed, so dedicated to this robot that I had to be there with them. I was struck by how engaged they were. So then I asked, okay, well, you came in 6th place. You don't get to go to the Georgia Dome. What's next for you? And all 11 members of this team, young black and Latino men from the South Bronx, said they want to be mechanical engineers. Now, what you should know is there are no mechanical engineers in their neighborhoods. But they think they can be mechanical engineers now because of this activity, because of what they did. That is, this school found a way to transform their identities. Think about that. If you don't have a strategy to counter the stereotypes that lead our kids to believe they could be ball players or rap stars or gangsters, but not engineers or artists or writers, your school's not going anywhere. Because the stereotypes will infiltrate the kids, and the kids will believe they can't do it. Eagle Academy, like Excellence, like Urban Prep, have created environments where it's cool to be smart. Think about that. How many schools can we say that for? How many schools can we say kids no longer believe that their racial identity determines what they can do academically? These are schools that are showing us it's possible to break the cycle of failure, to break the school-to-prison pipeline. It's possible to create schools where young men can thrive and can be themselves. Now, let me be clear. It doesn't have to happen in a single-sex environment. In fact, we've been doing a study of single-sex schools, and what we're finding is some of them are good and some of them are not. Because if you don't have good teachers, guess what? You're not going to have a good school. There's no magic to being single-sex. Prisons are single-sex, and they're not magical. In fact, there are many reform schools that are created that believe that concentrating all the problem children together is a good strategy. You know what we know now? When you bring together all the kids with a lot of problems, you get more problems. And when you assign them the weakest teachers, which is typical in many schools, you don't get much learning. These are schools that have decided they're not going to just focus on separating the boys, they're going to focus on creating an environment that nurtures, that encourages, that challenges, that stimulates, an environment that provides support and mentoring, that's safe. And let me say how important safety is. Because if you don't feel safe to be yourself, you can't learn, you can't perform. And it's very important because in some ways, if you don't do these things, and we're seeing this in some of these all-male schools, you can end up with a hyper-masculine environment, where there's more bullying, where there's homophobia, where there's violence and threats. Tim King realized that a while ago. He said, you know, we started buying into this very crazy research, this unfounded pseudoscience that tells us boys have different brains than girls. Not being done by neuroscientists, actually, I should warn you. Being done by people who think they're brain scientists. And they were telling us that boys were kinesthetic learners. So we decided that we would throw them a football. Every time they answered, they had raised their hand, we would throw the football to them. And then we realized, you know what? Some kids can't catch. And if they drop the ball, they're actually now more embarrassed. And Tim said, you know what? I was one of those kids. I couldn't catch. And I was wondering, why did we think that was going to work in the first place? And schools like Urban Prep are not buying into that. They are trying lots of different things to figure out how to get it right. They're not settling. And I had an exchange with Tim because his school, although it had very high graduation rates and very high college attendance, also had relatively high attrition. And they're looking at that. And although the attrition at his school was not as high as other schools in Chicago, it was still higher than they wanted it to be. So they're not trying to settle for easy victories. They keep asking the question, what does it take to make sure we serve these children well? The good news, there are co-ed schools that are doing that too. Thurgood Marshall in Harlem decided the best way to serve the African-American males was to make sure that every black male ninth grader entering high school is mentored by a 12th grade female student. You know why? Those female students are organized. They're focused. And you know what? Those ninth grade boys really like the attention. So rather than keeping boys and girls apart, no, they bring them together, but they bring them together deliberately, strategically, in ways to, again, address real needs. And Thurgood Marshall is a school that shows us that being black and being poor and being male need not be an obstacle to achieving, because Thurgood Marshall is an excellent school right there in Harlem. And then there's Berkeley. And I did a lot of work in Berkeley because we were studying the achievement gap in Berkeley back in 1996, and we decided we needed to understand how it's possible. And I guess Berkeley's probably a lot like Madison, huh? In a liberal community where there's so much support for public education, how is it possible that race and class seem to determine achievement? What's wrong here? Why? Why so consistent for so long? And we decided it wasn't good enough to simply complain about it. We had to go work with teachers. We had to go work with parents and students to figure it out. And so we decided we were going to study what was going on. So we created something called the Diversity Project. And together we studied that school over the years. But it wasn't simply research for research's sake. It was research for the sake of guiding action. In the first year, one of the things we discovered was that 9th grade math placement will predict future outcomes. And lo and behold, what we discovered was those who got into honors geometry were on the pathway to the best colleges in the country, and almost all of them were white students who came from private schools. And those who were being placed in pre-algebra, who were almost all black and Latino kids from Oakland and Richmond, were on a pathway that did not even lead to graduation. And we looked closer and we discovered that most of those classes were being taught by the least experienced teachers. And we shared that back to the school and started a conversation about what we saw. And we saw a school that was ostensibly integrated from the outside was segregated from within. Segregated in every way, segregated in the classes, segregated in the extracurricular activities, so much so that children at this school really did come to believe that race determined achievement, because that's what their experience showed them. So we used the research to challenge assumptions. We used the research to challenge practices, and it wasn't easy. A lot of those math teachers didn't want to teach those kids, especially the veterans. They said, no, I've been teaching too long. I don't want to see any more 9th graders. I teach calculus. I said, well, if you save your best teachers for calculus, you won't have any kids for calculus, none of these kids, because you've set them up. And we challenged the ESL teachers who claimed to be providing support but couldn't even show us what was happening to the students they served. Because it turned out that a lot of those kids were English language learners for life. They never learned English and never had access to the college curriculum and weren't graduating. And so the research helped to provoke a discussion, helped to challenge them, and it wasn't easy. Because people don't like being challenged, people don't like being exposed, people don't like being pushed. And after a while, we realized that the people we really need to engage were the parents. Because once the parents had the research, once the parents had the data, the parents could now be in a better position to hold the school accountable. And that created some conflict. And it wasn't easy because the teachers, again, didn't like being pushed, didn't like being challenged. They liked the old way, where they got to make the judgments, where no one challenged them. But over several years, we started that work in 1996. This year, Berkeley High School has the highest graduation rates for black males in the state of California. Highest graduation rate. It is a testament to the consistency, to the persistence, to the willingness of that entire community to look hard at the issue, to ask tough questions of themselves, and to be willing to engage. I know that these issues are tough for people. They don't like to hear about this because it makes people uneasy when you deal directly and explicitly with race. It makes them uneasy when we raise questions about accountability. Makes them uneasy when we say that if you can serve one group of children well, why can't you serve this group well? What's wrong with this picture? But if we're not willing to have that conversation, if we're not willing to ask more of ourselves, particularly as it relates to the education of the most vulnerable students, then we're complicit in their failure. And we're part of the problem too. Just like those young men at Rikers. So I would say this, that as you grapple with this issue, and I know that there are proposals for new schools, challenge those who want to create those schools. What's your strategy for curriculum? What's your strategy for teaching? What's your strategy for leadership? What's your strategy for support? Don't accept a half-baked idea. At the same time, don't thwart it just because you're threatened by it, especially if the track record of failure is so clear in the public schools. The failure warrants a new approach, a new strategy, a new willingness to engage. Treat the charter as an experiment, as a pilot. even as you continue to find ways to address the issues differently in other schools, because there's no one solution. There's no silver bullets. By now we should all know that in education. Anytime someone says, just do this and everything will be solved, they're lying. There's no silver bullets. There's no curriculum out there that will save our kids. There's no one teaching method or one software program. It's never that simple. It always comes down to highly effective teaching, good relationships between adults and kids, early intervention strategies, parent engagement. It always comes down to the basic things that we know show up over and over again in schools that are making a difference. And so my challenge to you here in Madison is, if you're serious about the issue, at this great university town, you should be able to do better. You should be able to do better. I'll say this, if we loved our kids as much as we love football, our kids would be fine. They'd be fine. They'd be fine. So my challenge to you in Madison is love your kids. Love your kids, all your kids. My challenge to those who are opposed to affirmative action, because I heard that's been an issue being discussed recently, who oppose the idea that we are trying to give an unfair advantage to children who come from disadvantaged families, then you should, if you are serious about equity, then you should be outraged about unequal access to preschool. Outraged that children are allowed to come to preschool unprepared, or to kindergarten unprepared. You should be fighting for that right now, not for worrying about who gets into the university. Start there. We have so much hypocrisy, it kills me, huh? So I encourage you, educators, parents, students, let's work together. Let's problem solve. Let's engage each other. Let's collaborate. Let's do this. No more excuses, no more complaining. Let's learn from what's working and make it happen here. Thank you.
Professor Noguera, thank you for those riveting and clarifying remarks. I think that they are so incredibly timely, given the things that we're facing right now as a university, but more importantly, the things that we face in the state of Wisconsin, and indeed in the city of Madison. One of the things we wanted to do with this particular opening keynote was create a national context, but also to create a Wisconsin context, to speak to the premise of the Wisconsin idea, which is that the boundaries of the university and the boundaries of the state must always be commingled. That the focus of the university, that to be a great public university, must always be focused on the issues of greatest relevance. We chose this particular topic not because Damon is of the gender dynamic and the race ethnicity dynamic of the topic. We chose it because it is one of the epic issues of our time. Professor Noguera has got us off to a marvelous start. Thank you so much. Within that spirit of the Wisconsin idea and continuing to move the conversation from a national level to a local level and then to an interactive space with Q&A, which will bring Professor Noguera back, I will now introduce our next individual who will make a contribution to the discussion. He is an alum of the University of Wisconsin-Madison School of Education. He's an individual who's been doing tremendous work on the national level around these very issues, and we are incredibly fortunate to have brought him home to Madison, Wisconsin, to the state of Wisconsin, where he continues in the light of the ideas that were introduced by Professor Noguera. It is my great pleasure to bring forward to you Mr. Kaleem Kerr, CEO of the Urban League of Greater Madison. Mr. Kerr.
I'll just go ahead and start by telling you what I'm going to talk with you all about today. I'm going to keep my comments very brief. I'm going to take you through a handful of slides. When Damon said we want to give you the local context, we want to give you a real context for what's really happening in Madison, in this area that we live in, Madison Metropolitan School District, which covers a little bit more than just Madison. But we want to also call you to action in this presentation of ours, because if people haven't figured it out yet, we're not letting up one bit on our pursuit of equality for our young people, our young men and women, and it's going to get more intense from here. So I will show you as soon as we get this up. So I focus this on males, so all of you who've been following the press, we do have females also, okay? But I'm trying to keep it. I want every one of you who clapped to sign that petition online. All right. So let's go through this. I'm going to read from here. I'm just going to tell you one slide, who we are as an urban league, because we don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but why we're trying to pursue this school for young men and young women in our community. And then overview of Madison Preparatory Academy. And again, I'm going to focus this conversation on the context of young men. So our mission in Madison and the Urban League of Greater Madison, which covers all of Dane County, we summed it up in one word. We had a great mission statement, but we changed it from improve to transform. That's the only change we made in our mission statement when I got here, because it's one thing to focus on improvement. And those of you, please don't take this wrong, who are social workers. We're having this back and forth with some people involved with the teachers union about social workers, and are we going to have social work? I said, we don't do the kind of social work that y'all do. Your focus is on tending to people's problems. Our focus is on transforming their lives. There's a big difference in that job description. And so this is what we are trying to do, and that is why we are also trying to pursue this school. Our vision is to ensure that Greater Madison becomes the best place in the Midwest. We know we can't say the country because we got Atlanta and a lot of other places like that where black folks would certainly argue with us. And I'm sure Latinos in this community would say there are other places that are better, and white folks too, right? So we said the Midwest. We focused it on that for everyone to live, to learn, and to work. And I think that when people hear that Madison is best in, it's a good marketing strategy. But for a lot of us who've lived in this community, as my family has been over 100 years, we laugh at that. And we want to be able to smile with it. So, future of our young people is uncertain. This is a young man who goes to school here in Madison. We had a lot of young people, young men and young women. We suited them up in our uniforms and took photos. We wanted to be really authentic. But when I talked to this young man about the educational outcomes of young people in this community, we had these conversations. So for you, those of you who have been here for a long time and those of you who have not, I want to give you a sense of where we are now and where we've come from. In 20 years, Madison's changed. It's changed. If you look at this population of students, we had 23,000 students in Madison school system in 1991. We had 24,500 last year. We had a 80% white student population 20 years ago. That number's almost cut in half. Do you see that? Now, if you go over to the right-hand side, you can see that our Latino population in the last 10 years has grown faster than any population in this community. Some of that is by the change in their population. Some is by also the percentage of makeup of white students has declined also in the school system, whereas African-American students, the pace of growth has slowed down, but it's still a growing population of students and still the majority of students of color in the district. The poverty rate has also grown from 25% to almost 50%. This year, it's well over 50% of our student population. Of all students, if you look at this here, poverty rates among children, look at the change from 1991 and 2010 between black and Latino students. We're talking about a school system now where 85% of all black and 84% of all Latino youth are poor. Now that's federal standard poverty poor, which is poor, 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 poor. I'm serious. Anybody can live off of that these days. You can barely pay rent on that. That's what we're talking about. So if we were a school system that has struggled for 47 years from the first study that was done by Naomi Leedy, who is a retired professor at Southern University. She did her graduate work here on the Negro population in Madison. And she found that there were significant variations in achievement then, and that gap has only grown since. So if we weren't as poor then, and we are poor now, and I'll say real quick, when the survey that they did of South Madison, where a lot of African Americans have moved into, out of the 119 households they went to, only one had a person that wasn't working or wasn't a homemaker. Only one. Now, that's far different than that. So, higher poverty rates, 10th grade reading proficiencies. Look at that. We have the largest gap in the nation in our state and the largest gap in the nation among school districts our size in the country. And it hasn't changed in 30 years that we've been keeping track of that. Hasn't changed. Middle school special education, look at that. Now we know nationally for public school, for large city system public school systems, they have about 30% black males in special ed. We exceed that in Madison, in Utopia, okay? And then look at the graduation rate. We heard that that dropped for all students to 48%. We haven't extrapolated the data for black males yet, but we're certainly it's below 48%. So if that was last year and we're going in the wrong direction, what's up? Now look at this, suspension rates. Black boys and black girls lead every other population and gender in this community in suspension. There were 665 suspensions for white males. They were the third largest suspended group. Black females were the second highest at 920, and black males, 1,800 out of the 2,754 suspensions were black male students. Black students made up 72% of all suspensions in the school district and 24% of the student population. They made up 72% of all suspensions and 24% of the student population. You saw that at the bottom. Now here's the other thing. This is all students. Now Madison school districts have said they've had some change here. They went from 7% of test takers to about 12% of test takers, which is some progress. But when you have 378 black 12th graders, only 76 take the ACT, and you want to go to a state school here, which is cheaper for you if you got all that poverty, right? Best to go to a state school. If you want diversity, go to Milwaukee, Whitewater, Madison, you can get it. Racine, you can get a little bit. But only 7% of test takers were considered college ready. So when you break the numbers down, you're talking about 5 students ready for college, which by ACT standards means they have a 75% chance of succeeding in their entry-level freshman courses. So we're talking about 1%. So then people ask, why Madison Preparatory Academy? It's not, you don't see arguments for us as these scientists call this pseudoscience, right? They want to argue with us on brain development. I don't give a crap about that, to be honest with you. I think every brain can learn something. Am I correct? So that's not our argument. Our argument are there are no black fathers at home. They're all in prison, right? Too many of them in our state. 47% of all black males in this city are on probation, in Dane County, are on probation, on parole, and on some form of court supervision between that tender age of 25 to 29. 47 is the highest in the country, right here. But yet, we have people that show up at board meetings for the school board and want to argue with us about maintaining the status quo. Give us another 40 years to figure this out, Colleen. But they don't show up to the State House and tell them, get our young men out of jail. Keep them out of your prison. Give them opportunities. Give them jobs. The labor unions here that I called 4 times and would not return my call. When I had men come in, 5 men, it was 4 different situations, 4 times I called to try to figure out what's going on. They're saying they're getting jobs, but they come on the job late, they get left early. Then they tell me all these men are getting these jobs coming in from outside of Dane County. And I'm sitting here like, you go on these jobs, it's nothing but white people hardly. On these labor jobs, on breaking bricks on the street, building this building. Black people hardly had anything to do with building this building in terms of labor work. But give us another chance, Colleen. Not on my watch, not now, not ever. So if people honestly think that this is not going to change, and we have that local context, so here's what we've got, because I don't want to go too much beyond this. I'm going to go past that slide. and just tell you where we are with charter schools. There's over 5,000 charter schools in this country right now. Over half of them shouldn't be open. Be honest with you. I've seen a lot of charter schools that are terrible. So although I support charter schools, I'm not this gung-ho charter school advocate. Wisconsin charter school law was established in 1993. Now there's 223 charters released of last year. There's a couple more as of this year. How their achievement is mixed as well. But 540 public schools in the U.S. now offer a single-gendered education program. Most of them offer single-sex classes. And as Dr. NOGUERA said, there's no magical science to just having a single-gendered school. It's all the things that you do. But in a city like Madison, where there are hardly any black men working, where Latino men, they're in hiding and they work, right? We don't even know if they're here. Am I correct? Those two populations of men, and I'll even say Southeast Asian, I had a great conversation with Paying Her yesterday about how invisible they are to people here. They have a very difficult time getting work or keeping those jobs. So if we're looking at young men who are going to model themselves after people who look like them, and the only chance they have to see a black CEO is Kaleem Keir, Michael Johnson, Bill Greer in this community, there are no other black CEOs in Madison. That's it. We're all nonprofit. We got to run around to every school in America, in this town, so our kids can see us. I would much rather concentrate them in one school for personal reasons so I can get to all of them in one shot, right? Black girls don't have an opportunity to see their black fathers at home. Our mothers are struggling to take care of their families. Our Latino population is now in hiding because we want to ice them. Am I right? Come try to ice the kids in our school. It ain't happening. I am dead serious. I'll be the new Bull Connor, standing in the doorway blocking you. I am dead serious. We will do everything we can to ensure that our young people can dream, since we can't get the DREAM Act right? So they have an opportunity to go to college. So when people argue, why this single-gendered school, Kaleem? Because we are isolating for all of the challenges that these young people face in this community. We want to get it right with those genders of students who don't see replications of themselves in our community, who don't have the role models at home, who need a concentrated attention because what they see every day on television is an aberrant set of behaviors that do not move you forward personally or professionally. We're going to go back to old school values. Old school. Nothing we are doing is brand new except maybe the prep year that we put in there. Everything else is about making sure these kids are wrapped in support and love and care and no excuses. And so those people that want to stand in the doorway and block this from happening, they are going to get run over by the biggest Mack truck in American history, because that is how serious we are about this. Do we think that we're going to have 100% success with every student? I pray that we will. I can't guarantee that. But I can guarantee you one thing. The effort, the emphasis on love and care will be more omnipresent in our school than any other school in this community. Hands down. I can guarantee you that. So, when you want to know what we do, let's stop here. All male student body for this male school. Girls are going to get the exact same thing. International baccalaureate curriculum. People are like, oh, you're using that. Some say it's too rigorous. Get out of here. Kids, they use it in other countries for all their kids. We just decided in this country to use it as an elitist curriculum for certain kids to keep families from moving out of school districts. College preparatory educational program, what that means, education was everything about our school is about preparing you for the next level of your career, which is college, whether it's a 2-year, 4-year college. You're going to school beyond this. If you don't want to go to college, we still hope you'll come and we can convince you, right? But if you don't go to college right away, your skills will be prepared for whenever, you'll be prepared for it whenever you decide to go. Harkness teaching is teaching people around oval tables. How many of y'all have staff meetings, except you're in a police department, you look at them police shows, they're all sitting down in theater style with the chief sitting up there telling them what to do, right? How many of y'all have staff meetings where you sit in theater-style classrooms? Or do you prefer to sit around oval tables like you are right now? Right? It's easier to learn, it's easier to interact, it's easier to engage. That's why we're using it. And then mentoring and community support. Every teacher in our school will be a mentor. They will work longer, they will work harder. But I honestly think that most teachers, if they knew that they could have the impact on their kids, that they would prefer, they'll work harder because they're working hard and long now, right? And then last in prep year is, instead of making kids feel like failures, where we prove we can differentiate the curriculum, right? I'm all for curriculum differentiation. But if you give me a classroom where the differentiation is from here to here, I'm not gonna have as much success as if I can work with those kids for a year who are really behind academically, honing on their skills, so that when they get into the regular curriculum, their differentiation is here. And now I can succeed with them and they can succeed with us. So you all, we're gonna do our very best. I hope when Dr. NOGUERA studies our school, we've been in evolution and in advancement on what already exists. We can't make promises, but like I said, we can make promises on how we engage. So thank you so much, Dr. Damon Williams. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, and thank you all for coming today.
Thank you so much, Kaleem. Now, you will notice that we have microphones to the right and to the left. And so I'd like to invite Professor NOGUERA back to the stage. And I would like to invite you all to please come to the microphone and propose any questions that you would like to pose to our two distinguished guests. Yes, ma'am. Your name and your question.
Okay. My name is Vanika Mock. My question is to Kaleem Care. How can people support your school? What can we do to support you? I am a parent of an 11-year-old sixth grader.
Tell the school board to not ask us to jump through hoop number 540. That need to be number one. DPI 2, just putting it out there. Ask them to get this done, help to get it done, but also hold us accountable. You know, we've asked them to engage with an organization nationally that supports school boards around charter schools to help them develop an accountability and technical support infrastructure. And we would hope that either before they vote on us or after, that they would take us up or take them up on that offer, because they've offered it to them directly, so that, you know, the public can be assured of how well we're doing. We want that high level of accountability because we want people to see how we're working, when we're working, so they can become more enthusiastic about options like this. So honestly, at this point, it would be that. And if you want to engage with the organization around it, we have a lot of people in the community involved in this. If Stephen, can you stand up? Stephen Perez is our Director of Teaching and Learning for our consultant. You can contact Stephen and he can get you in the mix.
Fantastic, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Jay Babcock. For the last 57 years, the goal seems to have been to integrate schools. So how do you deal with criticism that your school might be serving to further segregate a population? Although it may be addressing their specific educational needs, it also has the impact of perhaps making them more hidden and separated from the rest of the community.
I'd love to hear both of our guests respond to that question, please.
Go ahead. The biggest practitioners of segregation are white people in this town. Seriously. If you take a definition and you apply it, how many all-white schools are there just in Dane County? How many all-white businesses are there just in Madison, in the 5-mile square radius of this building? So some of it is by choice, some of it is by chance. We're not concerned about whether or not our school will have more black or brown kids than white kids. We would hope that we would have. I could tell people, I'm more concerned that white families won't send their kids to our school, because we think they would benefit from that. Because the choices of residential movement and what happens with white flight and things like those are all real things. They're not fictitious things. They move away from us when we're in large numbers, not in small. And so that's our bigger concern. If we have all black and Latino kids, we're going to do whatever we can with the kids that come to us. We're over-marketing to poor communities. The disproportionate number of kids that are poor are black and Latino in this town, so that could be possible. But another way people could help us is to encourage white families to take a chance and sign their kids up to come to our school. That would help us with the segregation issue.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I was struck by the numbers when you look on the chart, that the steady decline in the white enrollment. And so where are those white children going? Either white people in Madison are having fewer children, which is also possible, or they're pulling their children out and sending them someplace else. And I think it'd be important for the district to look at that, why that's occurring, why the demographics are changing. What we see nationally is that after the Brown decision, there was a slow but steady increase in the number of integrated schools up through the 1970s, and then the reverse started happening. And what we've seen is white flight from cities and from school districts across the country. So we've ended up with de facto segregated schools, but with predominantly white teaching force. And I would say that the evidence of failure, which is pretty pervasive, particularly in urban schools in the country, suggests that that's not working for us, right? And we need to look differently and try some new things. Now, I think that integration is still a goal we should be pursuing. We shouldn't give up on, though I don't think the federal government agrees, because I don't hear them talk about it anymore, right? But I do think that the only way to drive and make integrated schooling a reality is through quality schooling, right? People are not going to, especially middle-class people, will not put their kids in schools where they don't think they'll get a good education. Right? The only people who do that are poor people who have no option. Right? Middle-class people have had options for a long time. And so now the question is, can we create quality schools for the kids we have? Hopefully, quality will bring the white middle class back, hopefully, but it remains to be seen.
And I can say that from our school, we think it will. I mean, there's such a diverse group of people in this. White families are stepping up. We just found out, and we're going to announce who it is. I'm just going to go ahead and tell them, Keitra. We got a huge donation just the other day, over 5 years, to drop our per pupil to below 10,000 in terms of what we're requesting from the district. And there's more folks that are coming to the table. So maybe by providing options like this, a science and tech school, a performing arts academy, things like that, we would be able to bring folks back into the city.
Yes, you've been very patient. Your name and your question.
My name's Lauren Klink, and I had two questions. One was, is there going to be a lottery for the Madison Prep School? And the second question is, I've seen a lot about how charter schools succeed because the hours are longer and the year is longer. And how will you accomplish that while being within the union?
We had already planned into our budget. We just didn't put it in the budget that was shared initially to increase the cost for extended school day, extended school year. We have done that in the budget that has been shared, so that we're not concerned about. The whole union charter school thing and extended school day, we think more schools should go towards that. And did I miss the first part of your question?
Oh, I was wondering if you're
The
having
lottery, yes, we will have a lottery, we think. The state defers to the lottery system for other types of public education programs too. Ours will be an open lottery, so we aren't legally challenged by parents with a blind lottery who say, are you sure my kid wasn't selected? So yeah, if our seats are oversubscribed, meaning more kids apply than we have seats available, then we will go to a lottery to select them fairly.
Thank
Professor
you.
Noguera, might you comment to the pedagogical significance of extended school day and whether or not that adds benefit, and if so, how, or if it does not?
Yeah, I would say that nationally, a number of schools are looking at this as part of the solution. That is, because American children, particularly children from poor and disadvantaged families, need more learning time. And so it's a longer day, longer year, and this is a national movement. Now, of course, quality is what matters even more, right? So it's not simply more time, it's the how that time is spent. And what I think is also important is that that not just be kind of drill time, but there'd be time for more enrichment, so that there will be music and art, and it's an enriched curriculum, not a narrowed curriculum. So I think all those things are important about how we use the time, but I definitely think time is a critical issue.
Excellent. Yes, your name and your question.
Hi, my name is Megan Jeffers, and I have a question for Dr. Noguera. Can you spend a few more minutes talking about the Berkeley School, I think it was, the one where the math placement issue and the different tracks? How did what specifically more did the school do to change that around? I'm wondering about Mr. Kerr talking about the prep year for the students here, if they did anything like that, or if they went to the middle schools to help better prepare the kids who were coming into that school.
Well, Berkeley tried many things, but finally what they settled on was small schools within a high school. Berkeley High School is over 3,000 students, and so one of the feelings was that it was just too impersonal, and that they needed to create small learning communities, a way to better know the students, provide more support, and that's where they changed it. And it was actually, it's a young woman who's from here, Jessica Quindell, who is, I think she's from Milwaukee actually, but led the math department at Berkeley High and created the effort to create the small learning community, what's important about the math, and this is what had to change, is they started focusing on making sure that the children learn the material. I mean, it sounds like really obvious, but you know, if you think about math is cumulative. If you didn't learn the beginning stuff, you're not going to be able to understand the stuff that comes later. And what was happening in too many classes, kids were they were just marching through the curriculum, and kids were being left behind. And so they adopted a mastery-based curriculum where they made sure no child was left behind in terms of the knowledge base. And it really started to produce big change in math outcomes. And so, but a lot of that was led by teachers at the school.
So even though placement in a pre-algebra class might still have happened, developing the kids from there and getting them on a track towards more success sounds like what they were doing?
Right, but what they also did, because one of the things that they hadn't even looked at, and the kids were saying it, they were saying, the kids who were being placed in pre-algebra kept saying, we had this before, right? And it turned out that the 9th grade pre-algebra was almost the same course as the 8th grade pre-algebra, right? And in fact, it didn't actually prepare you for algebra, right? So what they had to do was completely change the curriculum. I mean, the Canadians have figured out a long time ago, you can actually start teaching algebra much earlier. They teach algebra in 3rd and 4th grade, right? Because you don't need advanced arithmetic to start understanding algebraic concepts. And so they do both. They teach the arithmetic that you need, but they're also introducing algebra much earlier now in the middle schools, and that's helped change the outcomes in the high schools.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Your name and your question.
I'm James Howard. I'm the president of the Madison Metropolitan School District. I want to talk just a bit, or ask the question around this whole area of segregation and quality schools. It was just stated that if we want to keep parents in our schools, that we need to make sure we have quality schools. I'm always, it's a little bit mind-boggling to me when you look at the Madison schools and you look at the flight of white parents. It's a difficult situation because if you look at college readiness data, what the data indicates is that the Madison Metropolitan School District is educating at least white kids as good as most schools in the nation, and definitely most schools around this area. And so it's mind-boggling to me. It seems as though we're doing a very good job of educating the group of people that's leaving. So the question I ask is it really quality schools? Because we're doing as good a job, and if you look at college readiness scores, compared to anyone. So why are white families leaving?
You know, I'm going to say it again. The data and the history show, research study after research study, when you go, they call it the tipping point. When you get beyond 25 to 30% of students of color, and when it's just looking at African Americans at 20, you see a precipitous decline of white families in your school or your school system. And it mostly traces back to race. I mean, that's what the data, you can look at a research study, it doesn't say that, there are probably very few. That's a big issue, but I will agree, my sons are now going to West High School, and they really like West. And I would say Dr. NOGUERA, what he talked about first was the creating of the small learning communities. They have that at West. It's culture before curriculum. You know, that's our focus at Madison. You have to create the culture of achievement. Now, they struggle with being the only black males in their classes and not having black teachers, and they see all of those things play out, which can challenge our kids' success and performance. But they have the ingredients where they could be very successful here. And for white students in that school, it's a great opportunity. So I agree with you that there are very few reasons to leave some of our schools in Madison, other than issues that probably have an impact on race, centered around race and poverty.
It's a discussion.
I would just add, it's something I think you should look into here, to what's driving it, because what you risk, if the district continues to experience that white flight, is you will start to see less and less public support for the public schools, right? And that will be a political problem for the children that are left. So I would say it's something that you need to kind of get a hold of and to figure out what's going on that's driving the flight, and whatever it is, see what can be done about it.
To my left, your sign and your question.
My sign?
I meant your name. I just wanted to make sure everybody was still with me. Your name and your question.
My name's Beth, and my sign is Taurus.
All right.
Just so you know.
All right. All right.
I'll talk to you later about that. Kaleem, I haven't had a chance to check in with you for a long time. You've been a little busy lately. I've been out of town at a conference on engagement. And I know the last time I read the paper, it was this hurdle number 540, that the school board wants you to prove that the single-sex classrooms are better than the co-ed classrooms. Is that already solved? And if not, we're sitting here on top of a lot of researchers that would be glad to help you put together that information.
Well, yeah, let's get together and do it. I mean, we've put together a lot of stuff already. It's out there that shows there's not a lot of studies, unfortunately, and some of the studies say that there's not really you can't really trace a significant impact back to gender. Some say that it is. There aren't really many that say that it's harmful. There are some neurological studies that say that provide by putting males in these environments can increase aggression and things like that. But, you know, we're going to provide something, but what we're also going to send them is a legal document that, and the paper should tell them this in advance, that asks them to share with us, and there's going to be a lot more in there than this, tell us we want the empirical evidence on every single program that you have funded with federal money.
Yeah.
We want empirical evidence from the Madison School District about its, Madison didn't ask that, but they're under DPI. So we have to ask them about their positive behavior support program, the other things that they're doing. We're going to ask them for scientific evidence, because the challenge that they've done is they've interpreted the law and the regulations around single-sex education now. CFR, what is it, Part 34, Part 664. That's the regulation. And they've interpreted it where they should ask us for that, but there's nothing that requires them to ask us for that. Mm-hmm. So either they can decide to not ask us that, or we're going to ask them that for every single program that they fund with federal money.
So we can go to the school board meetings and kind of help push that along to
and I think
kind
it's
of get over
silly,
that.
honestly.
Very
I shouldn't even
silly.
have to ask that. I wouldn't ask that of the school district. Give me evidence if there's something already in work here that it has potential to succeed, and if it's not succeeding, tell me how you're going to do things differently.
And
that's a better way to come at it.
Dr. NOGUERA, you've done some research in this area too.
Yeah, so I would say there's no clear evidence that separating students by gender necessarily will result in better outcomes, because there's so many other variables you have to control, like the quality of the teaching, the overall quality of the school. So absolutely, there's no evidence that just separating. But we have a long history of single-gender schools, parochial schools, military academies. Many boarding schools have been single-gender for a few hundred years. We also have several public and charter schools now across the country that are single-gender that we can learn from, and that we can model ourselves after. And the research there is very compelling of what the ingredients of success are. So if we say we want to model it after an urban prep, well, I think there's a very compelling case. They've been successful, and if we follow that example, we also have pretty clear evidence of failure. And I think that should also be taken into consideration.
Thank you, and let us know what else we can do to help.
We will. Thank you.
We're going to go right here in the middle for the next question, but before we go there, I would like to pose a question to the panel. You both have spoke with great clarity and coherence with regard to Latino and African American Black male children, but one of the demographics that we know also sees disparity with respect to gender equity is Native American youth as well.
Yes.
And I think that many of my colleagues would probably join with me as no critique of either of you, who I know are great champions of education for all children, that is a group that oftentimes is absent from a discussion. I would be remiss if I did not interject that into our discussion today. Might both of you respond to your insights around Native American youth and underperformance from a gender perspective, and also to Southeast Asian, if there's anything that you might add there, Hmong, Vietnamese, Laotian, also groups that we focus on here institutionally as underrepresented.
I mean, what we know pretty consistently, a consistent finding in education, is that the disadvantages children experience out of school often become educational challenges within school. So that if you think about, at least for Native Americans who live in reservations where there are high poverty rates and other social challenges, that those impact educational outcomes, right? And unless schools have a means to address those issues, then you don't see kids achieving and thriving in school. So I would say that that to some degree that this is true for white students as well. Poor white, we don't focus that much on the challenge facing poor white kids, but there are a lot of poor white kids who are not achieving and thriving in the country as well. So this is as much about issues of poverty and disadvantage as it is about race. Where race becomes a factor in this conversation is in the context of desegregated or integrated schools, where there has been a tendency, and the data here shows this, to disproportionately target those children for strategies that contribute to their failure, like special education. Now let me be clear here about this. There should be nothing wrong with special education if it was good, right? In fact, we would all want our kids in special education if it was good, because in special education, a child has an individualized learning plan, and we should all want that for our child, right? That we know exactly what they need, and that's what they're going to get. Except that in many schools, special education is used as a place to put kids that we don't want to educate, right? And those kids end up falling further and further behind over time. And so whenever you see a district where there's a disproportionate number of children of any group, whether it be our race or class, who are in special education or being suspended and expelled, you know there's a race issue here at work, or there's another issue, what the research calls secondary discrimination, in place. And if that's not addressed, you will just continue to see the same kind of disparities and the same patterns of failure over time. They'll just get worse.
And I'll say that, in the local context, again, with Madison, the school district doesn't enroll a large number of students that either identify as or are listed in the data. So it's hard to extrapolate the data, because the way data is done, and you have enough kids, you can't really see what's going on. So it's hard to speak to that. But with regard to what I know about Menominee, Black River Falls, some of the schools in our community, the social challenges equal the educational challenge, but I also say it's an empowerment issue. And as far as Madison Prep is concerned, our young people have to understand who they are, where they come from. They have to be proud of that. And so in our school, we're going to take extra special effort and care about ensuring our young people understand their community, their culture, the best of their culture, the challenges that their culture face, but with an eye towards how do we move through the challenges that we face. People say go beyond. Sometimes you don't want to go beyond. You got to understand it. We want to move through it. And we're going to do that regardless if we have a large number of American Indian students in our school or not. And depending on where our school is in the city, we're looking at a couple of places. One place, there's some interesting history. It's not far from here about how that land was taken from the American Indian community here. So our kids will understand that, but how do you move through it? So we're going to do things to try to address the needs and interests of our kids. But, unfortunately, we don't have a large number of students here where we can really speak to the data on their performance.
Thank you. We're going to go right here to the middle, then over here to Professor Magana. One thing I did want to say, though, is that I think it's so important that we understand that, and I think Professor Noguera did a wonderful job at shaping that there's a male context to this. Where we're seeing underperformance across the board. One of the things we have flashing out there is a wonderful digital poster created by wonderful colleagues in academic planning and analysis, which provides insights into some of that just from a gender-based perspective. Over 5 out of every University of Wisconsin-Madison students is a woman, and 6 out of every 10 graduates is a woman. So we see that we see those disparities here as we see them at a greater level when we combine economics and gender and race ethnicity across all demographic groups. Your patience has been so appreciated. Your question and your name.
My name, can you all hear me? My name is Krista Brun, and I want to first of all thank you, Damon, for your just last question. And thank you for reminding us of the sense of urgency of what's facing our children. I think you did an excellent job of giving us an overview of the different ways in which we can enhance the school experience for our children. What I would like you to speak more on is, as your statistics show so clearly and in black and white, if you will, almost half of our kids, depending on which group you're looking at, are not making it through school. And, we're talking about moving them on to college. That's a lot of kids in our community. And my son is one of them. So I'm just asking you, that in between, the path from preschool to prison is actually pretty short. And how do we better support our children who have already been failed by our schools and who have yet to enter the prison system?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, in many communities across the country, we have a phenomenon what they call disconnected youth, right? Of young people who are either they're in school, but they're not thriving there, or they're not in school at all, and they're not employed, and they're just kind of disconnected. And what we really need to think in terms of is building support systems for young people in communities. Systems that involve bringing in community organizations, nonprofits, that provide services to schools and to students that can, so that schools get the additional support they need, whether it be in the form of mentorships. For older children, it could be jobs or internships. We need to look at career and technical education. We need to look at a variety of options and pathways for young people, because for some young people, the traditional school is not the place where they're thriving. And we need to think, that's one of the reasons why, one of the good things happening in New York City now is there's been a proliferation of different kinds of schools. And that's, I think, helped because we have a lot of different kids out there with different needs. And so I would encourage you in Madison to think about what more support can we bring to schools from the community so that we can serve the very different kinds of needs that children have of different backgrounds.
I think that's a fabulous point made by Professor Noguera. My research group just finished doing an evaluation of a $5 million 4-school district project focused around these issues in male youth of color. One of the things that we found in that wraparound qualitative research was the specious absence of community-based engagement with the schools around these issues that becomes particularly heightened in those contexts where we're talking about densely populated, urban, and underrepresented communities. Professor Magana, you've been so patient. Your question, please.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, gentlemen. And I just want to say to Professor Noguera, one of my PhD students went off to work with some of your colleagues as a postdoc, Maria Hernandez, you might know her. So be happy to hear how she's doing. But I wanted to talk about the issue of ethnic studies. And you touched on it, Kaleem, in terms of, what does the research say about students understanding their background and their culture and getting them excited about school, because it's about them as well. I know with all the attacks on ethnic studies in Arizona, with attacking the high school programs, and the high school program has shown in Tucson, Arizona, that those students have actually, in the past had been dropping out, and then, that they were able to be successful and go on to college to some extent. So I'm not sure what the larger research picture shows, and maybe you could talk a little more about how you're going to include some of the ethnic studies knowledge in there. I know, of course, we have American Indian, African Americans Southeast Asians, you know, we need to look at all of those things. I think in Arizona what they did is they had a curriculum where you could, for example, focus on Latino studies or Black studies, but you would do that in the context of your American or social studies and English class. So those combinations, it's not like a side, you know, elective. This is the core kind of class. And I'm wondering from both of you what you think about that.
What I like about the IB program, if you implement it correctly, there's several things that they focus on, but three that really apply to what we're trying to do is they really focus on helping kids focus on intercultural awareness, who they are, cross-cultural competence, how they understand and interact with others, and international mindedness. You know, where do they fit in the broader global context of the world? In order to provide that, we have to give kids an understanding of where they come from. My grandmother used to say something about you can't cut the root from a tree or the tree will die. It may take a long time, but it will die. And any of you have trees in your yard, if you decide you're going to cut down the tree and you cut it down, you have to grind it out, right? So it doesn't grow back, and it won't. But if you even cut some of the roots, you go across some of them, part of that tree will start to die. You're like, what's going on? You know, you have to have an understanding, an anchor. Your past anchors you. It gives you a sense of empowerment, of understanding that our kids don't see. It's sad that there are children in our school system. My sons are hanging out with them now, and they're like, Dad, these black kids don't understand anything about themselves. I said, really? And we get into these deep discussions. They don't know much about music history. They don't know much about local history here. They don't have you know, when you don't know that Michael Jackson was the biggest selling artist of all time, right? That's an issue for me because I love music. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's that simple. Just simple things like our kids don't even have an understanding of like the understanding of poverty. Why am I poor? What has gotten me to this point? Is it because my family is shiftless and I shouldn't like my mom or my dad, or what has created this? So that's not an excuse for the situation you find yourself in, but when you can understand the historical context of slavery and of the Trail of Tears and all these things that have displaced people in American history, the Irish community and what happened to them in Ireland and how they were dealt with when they got here and how they were treated and how these restricted covenant laws around Catholicism or around race and movement and how these Blaine amendments and how they didn't want Catholics they wanted to disempower Catholics because they were building schools and all these things for all people. People need to understand that so their kids can then have a sense of, okay, now I understand where we came from and I understand more about why things are, so now I can feel empowered about how I can change it, not burdened and bogged down by it. And that's what we see a lot in our community now. You see all these people walking around hopeless. And I'm like, you better stand up, pick your pants up, hold your chest up, because there's a lot of people's shoulders that you're standing on. You just don't see the shoulders. So we're going to help you understand whose shoulders you are standing on so you can walk more proudly. And so that's why it's important that we do what we do, and that's how we're going to get it done.
If I could add, I would say that part of the challenge is to infuse that knowledge into the entire curriculum, right? It should not be that you have to wait till February to do a Black History Month, or that, you know, we'll do a Mexican celebration on Cinco de Mayo. That we want to, ethnic studies is American studies. It should be that it appears throughout the curriculum.
Yes.
And that it is totally integrated because, and I would say that white children need it as much as the children of color, right? They need to understand what this country is made up and how it came to be the way it is. And so, you know, I would just caution against, you know, in the past, I think we thought that we would just add it on as a separate class or a separate event. And I would say that is not nearly as effective as infusing it throughout.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You have been so incredibly patient. I believe our last question of the Q&A, your name and your question.
Petra Guerra, and thank you both for a fantastic presentation. It was really great. Dr. Noguera, I can understand the New York schools, but I don't understand Madison or Wisconsin either. My son went to the All Humanities in Manhattan, and my granddaughter graduated from Amistad, an immersion school, English, Spanish. and I should say Beacon. So I understand New York schools because I also work for the New York schools. But my question is, we've done segregation, we've separated them by sex, we've done all these things, and some of them have worked. My question is, should we be looking, and I know people from education are probably going to throw their cups at me with coffee, but should we not be looking at our curriculum where we prepare teachers and some of the things that you just finished talking about? Some of the things that you just answered for Dr. Magaña's question, I also work in ethnic studies, Chicano Latino studies. Should we not prepare, do something, change, whatever, maybe not change, I like your term.
Transform.
Transform, there you go. Transform our teaching curriculum at the university. We are at a university. Transform our curriculum so that we prepare teachers in a better way to include those things. And then when we send them out to the schools, they will have a knowledge, an awareness, a sensitivity of all those things that we see missing. As a professor, coming from a school that's 90-some% Latinos and being one of two Latinas in the whole department, it kind of hurts that we are maybe not preparing people when they get, the road to the ivory tower is real bumpy, right? Because we're not prepared when we get there. Then we get to the ivory tower, then we're not prepared there either. So maybe we need to look at some of those things. I appreciate the idea that we have to start down there at pre-K, maybe, I don't know, maybe pre-K, but who are those teachers that are going to be working with our children? That's what I'm bringing to you.
Sure. Well,
Thank you.
It's an interesting question because you have some of the national leaders on multicultural education right here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So I'm wondering, how are they involved in this work, and how are they involved in your teacher education work? Because these are people that are being read widely, whose work is highly influential and should be showing up in the teacher education. So I think you're absolutely right. I think across the country, schools of education are being forced to reconsider the whole approach to training of teachers, right? And I would say right now, Secretary Duncan likes to cite a statistic, which is true. 62% of new teachers say they were not prepared well. But that's because the gap between the preparation of the university and what they actually experience in schools is too wide. And what we need to do is find ways to get those teachers into schools earlier, but get their professors there with them, right? So they're in the context of the schools and helping them figure it out and what are the most effective strategies, because it's not good enough to give our students theories, right, of pedagogy that they don't know how to apply with real children. But I would say this idea of infusing the culture is something that you've got great people here who know a lot about that. The question is it being applied and made available at schools here in Madison and elsewhere? So,
I would say that's something that sorry, Damon.
Please.
That's something that the school district here is focused on. I will say that, the culturally relevant teaching. They have a program. It's been small. I do know that they want to expand it. I've been impressed with the teachers who choose to participate in it. They get a lot out of it. I do think it has to become mandatory. Programs like that should not be by volunteer only. But then beyond that, the district should be getting teachers from teacher education that already are armed with those skills, that have that teaching as a function of their educational experience and a requirement for them to get through college, and that it should be part book, part experiential. There needs to be a balance there. As you become culturally comfortable in different environments, your ability to interact with people in a more natural way builds trust. When all you've done is learn out of a book, it's like me learning Spanish. I'm terrible at languages, right? In order for me to really understand and do well at it, I'd have to go live there. That's just how I learn. But when people engage me with Spanish, I get so intimidated. I really do. I'm just being honest with you, because I'm afraid to speak it back because I learned it in a book, So if you teach that, it takes practice, exactly. So I think that immersion. That's a better example. And so I think that we're making steps there in our school system. We really are. Y'all should call a district about that. But we need to make those things mandatory. I know where the district could use help on that is a teachers union. Teachers union should not stand in the way of making things like that mandatory. I don't know if they are, but if they are, they shouldn't.
Final question.
Thanks. Don Gillian Daniel, Sagittarius. So my question is simple. I would love to leave here with a list of 10 things that we as an institution, because you've challenged us, can do to address these issues. What are the top 10 things that we can walk out of here and do within the next week or the next month or the next year?
Five each.
Which institution? The university as the institution?
As an institution, as individuals within the institution.
Of the university. What the university can do.
What we as individuals at this university,
Okay.
whether we do it as an individual or collectively.
All right. Well, I would say, I just talked about schools of education changing the way we do the teacher education, so it's much more school-based. I would say don't just leave it to the schools of education. We need to get the math department talking to math teachers. We need to get the scientists talking to science teachers. We need to, the university, I said this recently, it kills me that we have great universities in so many cities and they have no connection at all to the schools in their neighborhoods, right? And that's a crime. And it should not just be up to the schools of education to build that collaboration. So I would say that we need to look at ways to develop curriculum in a lot of areas that's engaging, that's cutting edge, that's challenging to kids, and that's informed by the best research that's out there. So I would look throughout the university for ways to involve. I would also say that universities have people in other roles who can work as tutors, who can work as mentors, who can be in. So the big advantage of being in a university town is you have all these students. When I was teaching it, even now, I'm able to get my students to go out for credit to be tutors in schools and to work with students. You have this army of educated people that you can deploy. There should never be a student in Madison that needs a tutor and can't get one free, right? So I would say that those are all ways you can also support the schools.
Thank you.
And I would say, folks need to just need to express some courage. You know what I'm saying? And start demanding change. It's one thing to study it. It's another thing to demand it. And we have such an intelligentsia on this campus of people who can provide help to those of us in the community, can provide empowerment, who can bring the research and legal, the background, and all the things that underprivileged or disempowered communities often lack in defending and fighting for their own rights. And that's a way that the university could get involved, is get involved to help those folks. And don't bring the second thing is just your way of understanding of how those things should be done. Listen to the folks who are there and empower them. And third, I think the university itself could do a whole lot more to be a leader around diversity in this community. I'm glad Damon has them focused on that. But be the example of it. Hire us. Provide us with a community space in order to grow and develop and be a part of this community. Drive it. Use your bully pulpit. You spend more money in this city, than anybody else. You got more money. You have more buildings. Use that power to drive it among business leaders and people like that here. And those of you individuals in the room here, give up a little bit of your each day to help somebody else. That's all we can do.
Thank you.
I think that was a fabulous point for us to end this portion of the program. I'd like all of you to join me in thanking our distinguished guests.